Thanks for staying with us on the Sports Show. Time to talk SANFL, and our master on that, Luke Marchioro, joins us as always. Luke, how are you?
Good, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Great, mate. Now, we want to talk about the break a little bit later on. Let's talk about last week's games, because some of them are impacting now on how the five's going to finish. Norwood, 12-point winners over Adelaide. Are Adelaide on the slide?
I think so. I think we sort of hinted at it last week with their AFL side slowly getting a few more injuries and guys not being able to play. And Matt Crouch didn't play on the weekend. They had a couple of other guys in Sydney with their AFL team. So all of a sudden you start going from, you start losing players out of that team. But Norwood had missing Marty Panos, and it was a good win for them as well.
Adelaide weren't too bad on the weekend. Norwood started really well. They kicked 3-6 or something before Adelaide even hit the scoreboard. But if you look at the rest of the game, Adelaide were fairly competitive right to the death.
They made a few positional changes. They put Jimmy Rowe in the middle in the second half, and he had a real impact. He kicked 3 goals and was probably the Crows' best player. But Norwood did a lot right in that first half, really good defensively. I think the Crows' forward 6 had 5 possessions combined at half-time, Gollant and Mackesy and Pedler and these guys. So they did a really good job at limiting their forward line. And we've seen that defensive side of Norwood's game for the last 2 years, and the offense has come with it. So they did a good job on the weekend at that.
Yeah. I just want to talk about South Adelaide. I watched on TV, and they absolutely spanked Glenelg a couple of weeks ago, and they've beaten Sturt last week, so they're just creeping their way back up. If they make the final 5, could that be a roughie?
They were a bit like that last year. They sort of just fell into the finals last year. They started really well and built towards the end of the year. Starting to get some personnel back. Eamon Wilkinson kicked 3 goals on the weekends, missed a lot of footy. Matty Rose is back playing footy. They got Mitch O'Neill back off the concussion, who's a really important midfielder for them. And Bryce Gibbs is lurking with a couple of rounds to go. He's slated to come back. So if they can win this week and win the next week straight after the bye and keep themselves in touch, they finish with the Eagles in the last round. So could be a play-in for 5th spot in that last round as well.
It's got to set it up, doesn't it?
Ultimately, they've lost their last 3 losses have been by combined 5 points. So they're probably going to rue one of those games. If they could have flipped one, they're right in the mix. So 2 games back and an inferior percentage is going to be difficult, though.
It's a good win, that.
North Adelaide bounced back, mate. They've been battling the last couple of weeks. Big win over the Eagles. Are the Eagles decimated now with losses and injuries?
Well, not so much injuries. I don't think they've had a lot of injuries. You looked at their reserves on the weekend. Jesse Lonergan played in their reserves. Jared Redden played in their reserves. And they've added Cam Ellis-Yeoman in. Just a connection thing. I just don't think they've found their right midfield mix at all this year. The Eagles, and they've really struggled. When they get the ball in there, they look really dangerous, and Ballandon's probably the one injury that they've missed. When he's played, they've generally won as a big key forward. But for North Adelaide, I spoke to Jacob Surgeon after they got beaten by the Crows in Whyalla, and it was really one quarter that cost them that game. They kicked 2-7 in the first quarter, but he said that they'd had the same team for 4 or 5 weeks, and on the weekend he made a couple of changes and just puts guys on edge a little bit as well. Sometimes you can get really comfortable, and I think that was what he was hinting at, that unchanged, guys can think, we're always going to play, but they made a few changes on the weekend and they came out really hungry, especially in that second quarter. They put the game away.
Yeah, I still like North Adelaide. I'm still a bit North Adelaide bound, but Norwood are a bit surprising. There's a few sneaky chances.
It was nice for Port Adelaide to finally obviously have a nice convincing win against Centrals. That was important for the club.
I think they just had to win. I think they've copped a lot of criticism from a lot of Port Adelaide Magpie people with the way they've approached the SANFL this year. They had some real quality come back in, Motlop and Fantasia and Teakle in the ruck. And, when you add 3 or 4 of those guys in, we've seen it with the Crows when they go out. Port brought them back in this week. But full credit to Centrals, they didn't roll over in that game. It was 15 points halfway through the last quarter. And
it was.
Probably could have pinched it. And, that's Centrals again playing some really good footy and, building towards the back end of the year as well.
What was important for that, the Port game, because I have seen them, early in the year with some big names in there that probably didn't play with the spirit that I think the Magpies supporters would expect them to. And I think that's been a real question mark about them wearing the Magpie Guernsey that we've spoken about before. But it looked like they had a lot of spirit. All the players that played on Saturday had the spirit, especially, obviously, like Fantasias and those types of players.
Yeah, they do. And I think, probably selfishly, a lot of those guys see the AFL team get beaten and probably think there's an opportunity to get themselves into that AFL side. Obviously, they've made some changes pretty consistently, and, guys like Dersma and McKenzie and that have been fringe AFL are really pushing their cases. So that team spirit also comes with that as well. So it was a good win for them, and they just had to win on the weekend.
Westies. Now, Westies, they beat Port a couple of weeks ago. They could have won that game against Glenelg on the weekend. John O'Beach had a chance.
Missed a shot late in that game, and Westies really dominated long periods of that game. The second and the fourth quarters, they were a bit behind, but they played some really good footy in that third quarter. Glenelg kicked the goal late just to get the momentum back, but every time Westies needed a goal, they got it. They kept themselves close, but ultimately Glenelg's class in their forward line just proved the difference. Matty Allen and McBean with some big pack marks late, and Glenelg played some good footy, just did what they had to do, but they're biting some kids, and some of their kids were putting in some really good performances with Glenelg as well.
Yeah. Just quickly with Westies, Gotchi's done a really good job with them. Does he keep his job next year, or do they say, no, too many losses, see you later?
I think you've got to stay the course with him now. I think they're a little bit in that group where if you bring a new coach in, then it's a new game plan, and all of a sudden people might not respond to that as well. So I think it's going to be a really difficult decision. The pressure's going to be on him, obviously, with only 3 wins in 2 seasons, but I think they've brought some really good players in. Callum Park was one of their best on the weekend. Jackson Edwards. They've been able to keep Hartlett and Keogh and Brand and bring these Westies juniors back through. So if they can add a couple more to that, they could be really dangerous next year.
You're picking the Gary medalists at this stage. I know we've only got a few games to go.
I think it's Aaron Young for me from North Adelaide. I think he's probably been the best midfielder in the competition in a winning team.
Snook?
Snook's been around the mark. He's been super consistent for Glenelg as well.
Yeah.
Riley Knight's the other one as well as a consistent midfielder. And Daniel Menzel, who's kicked a lot of goals as well when the Eagles have won games too.
Coombe?
He's been good. I think Young's probably been I think Coombs actually done some more defensive roles at this time this year in the midfield as well. Yeah. You've often seen him play on Luke Partington and Riley Knight and these type of guys as well. So I think it's going to be a really even count. We've seen it over the years. Paddy Wilson was another one who before the shoulder injury would have been up there as well.
Dominating, yeah.
But there's a few guys at a lot of these different teams. Even a guy like Kyle Presbury at Central District's probably been their best player every week. And if they win a couple more late, who knows what can happen there.
Look, always great to catch up with you, mate. The SANFL, of course, has a break this week. So next week we'll get you in, mate, and look at all the games coming up on the weekend. Always great to catch up with you, mate. Stay with us. Still plenty to come on.